So let me first begin by saying that social sustainability is one of the 3 pillars of the Nordic Council of Ministers' visions for 2030. So social inclusion is strongly emphasized as a crucial issue to be addressed within our vision. And it's therefore with great pleasure that I moderate today's debate, where our 4 esteemed experts will discuss strategies for building inclusive cities and share innovative solutions. So on stage with us today, we have Rashid Alkhateeb. Could you please join us? And we have Dmytro Mamaiev joining us here. Yes, great. And Alyssa Bittner-Gibbs. And Rashid. So please take a seat. You are all experts on integration, and on top of that, you've all migrated to a Nordic or a Baltic country. So this will enable you to bring with you the lived experience of inclusion. But before we dive into our discussion, could you please introduce yourselves very briefly to the audience? Rushy, would you like to start?
Well, my name is Rashid. I have been living in Denmark for about 47 years. I came as 9 years old from Pakistan, and I have been following the Danish educational system. And my professional background is that I've been working as a journalist. How do you say that? Breaking the ceiling by becoming the first newscaster with immigrant background in Denmark and setting the path for others to follow. And today I work with recruitment, and I've been working with diversity inclusion, which is a no-go word today, but that is nevertheless my background.
Thank you, Rushy. And Alyssa, please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Alyssa Bittner-Gibbs. I'm originally from the United States, but I now live on Åland via Sweden. I've had quite an adventure. This turn, moving to the Nordic countries, started in 2013, but I actually originally came to the Nordic countries as a Rotary exchange student in 1998. So I have a long love affair with the Nordic countries. I am here as a member of the Nordic Migrant Expert Forum, but I also sit as vice chair for the Integration Council of Åland. I'm also chair of Åland's Nature and Environment Association, and I also am active in local politics. I sit as a substitute in the Mariehamn City Board. Beyond that, probably even more importantly, I'm the mother of 4 children. I've given birth in 3 different countries: United States, Sweden, and Finland. And they range from age 14 to 3-year-old twins. So it's great to be here today.
Thank you, Alyssa. And Dmytro?
Good afternoon to everyone. My name is Dmytro Mamaiev. I am PhD candidate at the Lithuanian Center of Social Sciences in Vilnius. And I'm working basically within my research on the integration of Ukrainian young people in Lithuania. Well, I also teach from time to time, junior researcher as well within my institute. Have also scientific PhD networks that I'm part of, and where we try also to equip other PhD students with the soft skills. And I have also a chapter of socio-political activists back to my country, to Ukraine, and we deal mainly with the topic of political education. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ghieth?
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Ghieth. I am Junior Research Fellow at the Estonian University of Life Sciences, Chair of Landscape Architecture. Basically, I do research in the sense of place among displacement impacted persons, which include the displaced persons and the host communities, how they can attach to their new homes, and how they can recreate the concept of home. I'm also a member of an NGO called Neuro Landscape that works with the landscape and well-being. And originally I am from Syria, came to Estonia in 2021 to pursue my master's in landscape architecture, have been teaching for 1 year, and currently I'm pursuing a PhD in landscape architecture.
Thank you. So, before we dig deeper into this subject, I would like to know what is your vision of an inclusive city? So from each of your perspectives, Rushy, would you like to begin?
Well, for me to answer that question, what is an inclusive city? It is the feeling of belonging. It's a feeling of contributing, and it's a feeling of not being a burden. And especially when you come as a migrant, you come with burning all your ships behind you, and you have to start all over again. So if you get to be a part of the system, you get to be a part of the society, you get to be a neighbor, you get to be a colleague, you get to be a friend, then I think the path for being included and contribute to inclusion is much bigger than if you're just put in a refugee center where you can just sit and wait to be rescued. So you don't need a rescue, you need to contribute.
Yes, thank you. And for you, Alyssa, what are your perspectives?
For me, it's not just about welcome packets or the administration, it's about the experience. So I can definitely say that on Åland, I've been met with a lot of openness and trust. And the meeting I got when I arrived was very much like, oh, goody, you speak the language and you have kids, excellent. What do you do? What do you like? Do you want to come to this? Do you want to do that? You seem good at this, why don't you help? That's huge, because when people say to you that not only you're welcome, but you have something to contribute, it makes all the difference. So to me, the really big difference comes between most places, I think, sometimes meet migrants with cautious acceptance. But what they really ought to be meeting them with is a lot more enthusiasm and openness and curiosity.
Interesting. Thank you. Dmytro?
I think inclusive city, I will try to give such more official definition from my side. It's exercising of your agency, possibility to exercise it. So basically, when you live your life in the everyday life reality, and well, you can go to school, you can commute to work with the public transportation, you can do sports in the evening, and well, also to basically commit or to deal with whatever the individual wants or would like to do. And conditions that allow that to do for the human being, I believe those are the inclusiveness. And inclusiveness also, it can be characterized from the difficult point of view. I think I bring here more special aspect. However, I would say that this is conditions to exercise your agency to a full extent.
Yes, thank you. And right?
Let me here bring a little bit a different perspective. That an inclusive city for me is city that first acknowledges the special practices of its residents, and second, it should integrate them within its different systems. The policy systems, the social and cultural systems too. And what I mean here by special practices are the type of actions that city residents would do to repurpose existing places to meet their needs if places are not functioning well according to the residents' perspectives. In my research, I focus more on the displacement impacted persons. In the case of displaced persons, they engage in spatial adaptation practices. Adaptation of a place, meaning changing its functions, and adaptation to a place, meaning changing the personal characteristics to fit within a place, including its physical components and the social and cultural ones. So I would say that a city would be inclusive when it acknowledges that, when it looks into these special practices as something happening, something not of the system, it's part of the system, and not something incidental. Then this would be an inclusive city.
Okay. So I think that we can all agree that it really requires a lot of different expertise and also diversity of thought to develop an inclusive city. But who do you think should take responsibility in developing inclusive cities?
I can have a go for that. I think it's a collaboration between the civil society. It has to be a part of NGOs, and the third party should be the municipalities. We in Denmark had an experience in 2015 where there was a huge amount of Syrian refugees who came to Denmark, and they literally walked on the highways from Germany to, they want to go to Sweden because that was much better than Denmark at that time. But a lot of them stayed in Denmark, and at that time I was a part of the board of Danish Red Cross, and we had an activity called Friends Show the Way, Venner viser vej activity, where a lot of volunteers got together and they wanted to show and integrate the Syrians who stayed in Denmark to the Danish society. But the thing is that it's only an NGO, it's only volunteers who take up a responsibility to do such thing. It's okay for a period, but then the reality hits you and then it fades out. So what happened was that we had this activity for a period of time and then it stopped. The learning from that was that when the refugees from Ukraine came, we knew in the municipalities that if it is going to work, then we need to collaborate, we need to work together. So they got hooked up with the NGOs again and the local companies who had a demand for workers. And together they formed a kind of a triangle in which the refugees would be in, and the mapping of their competencies was alpha and omega. That was the first start. That was the first step to find out, okay, what is this person capable of and how can this person easily be a part of the society. So the triangle of the civil society, the municipalities, the governmental institutions, and the NGOs, and the person in center, the refugees themselves, is the way to go, I think, which works.
Yeah, so that it really requires a holistic approach. But Dmytro, do you have also, would you like to add something to this? Because you have done research on inclusion and migration.
I would like to complement and to pick up on the human-centered approach, on the holistic dimension here, because I think this is where we have to start from and then already to go into the different dimensions. I absolutely agree that this is a joint responsibility of designing of such spaces, because, I mean, we all live in society, we're all surrounded by the different actors, by the public authorities, by the civil society, but also by the small, medium, and large business, for instance, and also other stakeholders who can be involved. So I would not restrain it perhaps only to the triangle of the certain stakeholders. I would say that everyone who can contribute to that and who brings a perspective of the design, even on the philosophical level, for instance, right? Because we live in the age of globalization, and urbanization is one of the dimensions of globalization. And trying to forecast and to anticipate the future, what will bring to us, it's also one of the ways how you should approach to this matter. So therefore, it should be, it's a very complex process, but, sometimes there are no simple and very easy decisions. Sometimes you need those complex approaches to make inclusion functioning.
I have one more thing to add to that, because that is the structure that you can build a successful integration upon. But if you don't have the media with you, if you don't have people from my field with you to talk about the positive stories also, of course the negative stories will be covered automatically, and the sensations will also be covered automatically. But they emphasize on the good things that are happening and the positive stories that are also successful happening. It's needed to highlight them as well. not in a balance one-to-one, but still have a focus on that if you keep telling the negative stories of things that's not working, then it will affect the public opinion and it will start a negative circle. So you should have that in mind as well.
So there are multiple stakeholders that need to be involved. How about making sure that refugees and immigrants are included in the process? Ray, do you have some good examples here that maybe that you could share?
Yes, but probably if I can comment on what Dmytro and Rushy said, that maybe we need to look into who should be involved in building inclusive city from a different perspective, to look into how an inclusive city should be built. You know, the calls that we should promote the bottom-up initiatives and the grassroots initiatives and make it less from the top down. I think it's neither this, neither that. It's in the middle between what is top-down and what is bottom-up, depending on the local context and who is directly and indirectly impacted by any initiative or a project. For example, designing and planning a park within a neighborhood would be more leaning towards bottom-up initiatives with directly impacting and should be involving the residents of a neighborhood. But if we talk about designating a protected area in a city periphery, then there are other stakeholders like environmental boards who have very strong, let's say, word and maybe a final word in defining the lives of who would be living in this potentially designated protected area. So I think it's a matter of negotiation between what is top-down and what is bottom-up. And maybe this brings us to like an example of how refugees and immigrants can be better included in decision-making when it comes to city planning. I know there is a network that is based in Paris, in France, called Place Network. Every year they conduct a program called Resilient Cities, where they bring local actors, meaning elected city representatives and civil servants, and they bring also newcomers, which include immigrants, refugees, asylum seekers, but also international students. They bring them together, work on their capacity building, but in a way that is tailored to the needs of each one. They don't just generalize the tools and methodologies. They provide the local actors with tools that enable them for better inclusion, for better understanding of the local community needs. And for the newcomers, they provide them with leadership skills. And this way that the gap between the two becomes less. Through years and through training, this would enable better communication between the two sides.
Okay, great, yes. So we have good examples then from bigger cities, but how about if we go to Åland? And you have recently migrated to Åland. So what are successful initiatives of negotiation, as Red mentions is an important measure?
So actually 2 days ago, we, Mamaiev or Ålanders, we were told that we're actually nominated as a European Capital of Inclusion and Diversity Award for towns under 50,000. So to talk very specifically about the things that Mamaiev does, is that it's excellent at not only in terms of reception. We have an office called Kompassan that is especially established for immigrants to come, and they can learn about everything from accessing employment opportunities, learning language, finding associations, getting tips, open for skola. It's a lot. So it's pretty holistic. The other thing that Mamaiev does that's very good is that we have an integration council, specifically at the municipal level. So people are invited in, they're invited to influence policy. We also have councils as well for elders and young. So we make sure that they have a group where they can actually introduce their own agenda. Another thing that's really good about what Mamaiev does too is that it has a lot of cross cooperation. So the different areas are not as siloized I think, as other areas. So social services has communications with Compass, and which has communications with Red Cross, which has communications with the town. That also is very good in Mariehamn. One of the things I would say a little bit about the top-down, bottom-up approach, our sustainability agenda on Åland is built on this model. We have a Council for Sustainability, and we have a government, and we very closely track our progress. Right here is our voluntary review that was sent to the United Nations this past year, last summer. We've been invited into quite a few different United Nations discussions on how we can reproduce our model across the globe. So right now I'm responsible for some cooperation with UN Habitat, and I'm looking really forward to figuring out this together. How can we replicate these kinds of top-down and bottom-up models? What works best, what is universal, and what is culturally specific? The last thing I guess I would say is that we need to talk about the timing, because very often we say migrants should be included. But oftentimes, they don't get to be included until they're fluent in a language or they've been there for a while. Perhaps the most radical thing you can do is include migrant voices before they become fluent in the system that they're living in now. Because I think that too often, we wait till people have been there a while and have proven themselves or performed to a certain degree. But we need to know about the entry point, and we need to know about that really soon after they come, because that's when you can start acting with a more agile mindset to make changes.
Okay, so Dmytro, you have also researched particularly Ukrainian youth arriving in Lithuania. So how about, now we're discussing this inclusion in very broad terms. How about when we look at the needs of a specific group related to, for example, youth? Are there any special policy measures that you think should be taken?
Well, I mean, we come back to the point of the language knowledge and to the accessibility to the language courses. I mean, this is the main challenge that 95% of young people refer to. I know that the work is already being done on this dimension, so I cannot, really say what is taking place on the level of the policy measures. But I can say that as a way, perhaps for Ukrainians in Lithuania, they still can find a way to navigate with the knowledge of the English language or, well, Ukrainian and Russian in a way as well. However, in order to proceed to the more long-term integration process, I mean, language knowledge is necessary, and I know it from my own experience. If we talk, of course, about the adaptation or initial stages of the accommodation, yeah, maybe it's not really necessary to possess by the significant language knowledge. However, if it's a long-term process and there is a long-term planning behind that, this is a point. And I would like also to draw some parallel here between integration and inclusion. Both are the processes. So designing of the inclusive city, it's also a process which never stops, at least in my opinion. Likewise with integration, there is no end point of the integration to say that the person is integrated and that's it. I think there is always a space for improvement and what could be done more. But yeah, like when it comes, for instance, to the, this more special or economic aspects of inclusion, I wouldn't say that Ukrainians complain or refer to that a lot. I would outline vice versa, that infrastructure, for instance, in Lithuania has been outlined as, well, one of the very positive aspects. And for instance, the possibility of a lot of green areas all around the cities, possibility to use public transportation all across the country as well. opportunity basically to commute to the different areas between the local and rural, for instance. Those are all, I mean, being enlightened in a more positive dimension. So, but yes, I do agree, and I once again to pick up what my colleagues have mentioned is that we need to be aware about the complexity of this human agency, and I will refer once again to that. And this is being consistent out of language knowledge, out of some particular characteristics of the individual. There might be a perspective of disability as well. I mean, we are all different. All the human beings are different. So that's why keeping all of that in mind and, let's say, putting it as a standpoint, I think it's also relevant when it comes to the case of Ukrainian young people in Lithuania.
Thank you. Rushy, we in Denmark, we have received Syrian and Ukrainian refugees and trying to accommodate to the needs and also developing inclusive measures. Do you think that there are differences in how the city-states should prepare for different groups, or would I?
Of course, there's a difference because the culture is, the Danish culture is closer to the Ukrainian culture, if you look at from a helicopter perspective, compared to the Syrian, which is different because you have a different religion, you have different traditions, and you have a different way of looking at the society. So I think the integration of Syrians have been a bit harder than the Ukrainians because to somehow land in a Danish society which is very bureaucratic, everything is set in different structures, and you come from a society which is, learning by doing or struggling, and it's your own fault if you don't make it. If you have that upbringing or that mindset and come to Denmark where you have a lot of possibilities, but you should know your way around, that it can be difficult. And it was difficult for a lot of Syrian people. So what helped some places where they succeeded was that there was one person who was in charge for the connection of the refugees to the municipalities from the companies where they might be working. So this person could translate from Arabic to Danish and from Danish to Arabic to all the stakeholders. And that was a project that really helped, and that was copied to other municipalities as well with the Syrian group. With the Ukrainian group, the integration has been very good because a lot of Danish companies already had a connection with Ukrainian people. In IT, I know that a lot of Danish companies already had a lot of outsourcing in Ukraine. So when people came to Denmark, they connected with these Danish companies. And that was their way in, and in that sense, they could get help from the very first day. Besides that, the mapping of their competencies was made on Ukrainian language. And I know that Copenhagen municipality set up a special office to find out, what are the needs for our community, and how can these newcomers who come to our society contribute to that and make the mix match, which was very effective. And that has also been copied with other cities in Denmark. So it has been a totally different approach to integrate these two groups in Denmark.
Yes, what is your perspective on
I
that?
have just maybe one comment/complimenting of what Rushy said about the learning by doing that is maybe perceived differently within the host community and the NGOs that works perspective. That I, in my research, advocate for the urban governance, the adaptive urban governance, where we look at the incidental practices as something essential, as a truthful expressions of how the city should work. For example, if we look at some, I know the cases of some Syrian refugees who used to sit on the doorsteps in front of stores or in front of houses. The cases of Ukrainians are decorating their gardens in a way that reflect their cultural identity, that makes them feel home. All of these should be, how do I say, institutionalized through the urban planning policies, and being part of the system with flexible policies and through wider margins of freedom to adapt the city, because we need to raise the discussion that the city is or building a city is an interactive process that never ends. City is dynamic, that is not rigid, it's not just an implementation of the top down, it's something that happens naturally, that there are some things that go off the way, but they are true because they reflect what people want to see in the cities.
Do you have a good example of a city that has made immigrants feel really welcome and at home?
Yeah, I know there are, but it's from Western Europe, from the Netherlands. I know because still within the Baltics, it's quite few number of refugees and immigrants in comparison to Western Europe. I know there is a case of neighborhood cooperative in Rotterdam, where and most of the neighborhood residents come from immigrant backgrounds. They started doing this outdoor cooking, doing the informal markets. All of these started being there on the ground. Then an urban activist observed that, documented it, surveyed it and researched it to identify the problems with this. After a few years of research, the neighborhood could establish its own cooperative that could advocate for its needs. For example, in discussions with municipality, they could issue these short-term permits where they can use the space for these informal markets. So somehow they are impacting the policies. I would not say they radically changed it. It was a quite delicate change. I think this is one step how things can start from the grassroots.
Okay, that's a good example. And Rushy, you also have an example?
I think actually I have two examples.
Yeah.
One of them is from Denmark. We have an organization called Bydelsmødrene, how do you say that? Community mothers, that every social housing society, they have a group called City Housing Mothers. And what they do is that they, the key person has been educated sort of about the Danish society, about the Danish social system and so on. And this person gather a group of community mothers who lives in the suburbs, in the areas, and they meet up once a month, maybe once a week, maybe, and they talk about, okay, what are the challenges and where can we go and get some help? And these groups are formed in all over Denmark, and they are the one who would be reaching out to if you have some new refugees moving into these housing societies. So that is the Danish experience, which is really well functioning, and it has been prized by the Crown Prince Prize a couple of years ago because they have such good hold of the local immigrant women in Denmark. Then there's another project called the Leksand-modellen, which is a model that was formed in Leksand in Sweden, where when you expect a child, then you start a parents group that you gather a group of 6 or 7 people who are in the same situation, that they are expecting their first child. And you form a group of these parents, and it's beyond the education, the work, and what class you belong. It is, the focus point is that you are expecting your first child. So that group is around this situation, and they follow each other for 18 months. And in that period, you get to know people who you won't be talking to. So you have the director's wife or the director herself who's a part of this group. You can have the social advisor, you can have an immigrant, you can have different types of background. But what they are talking about is the well-being of the coming child. And when the child is there, they're talking about what will happen, what is necessary to know. So that forms the networks beyond the layers of the society, which is quite effectful. And of course, it has also been evaluated. So there is actually also kronas and to save, because this network helps each other when rest of the community is not there. So these are the two.
So civil society measures, yes. And Dmytro, what is your aspect on that?
I have knowledge from the literature review, what I was reading and I was studying, and I suggest we go beyond European continent and we go to Abu Dhabi in United Arab Emirates, and we go to Amman in Jordan, if I'm not mistaken. I think what is distinct about Abu Dhabi is that they host a large number of the immigrants from North Africa and, well, also from Eastern African countries. And so they have managed to organize Arabic learning language courses in some sort of consolidated manner. Then they have this some sort of also integration community delegated people. So basically the ones who come from the community and also who are interlocutors perhaps between the local authority and immigrants themselves. And yeah, there was one more aspect over there, but sorry, I forgot. And when it comes to the Amman, I think it's more about the refugees perspective more. So because they accommodate a lot of refugees, in particular from Palestine. So, well, starting from the organized refugee camps and also going into the already different dimensions when it comes to the language learning. And Jordan participate also in quite a number of the programs, I think, when it comes to the talent partnerships with European Union, so that the refugees have also opportunity to learn the language directly in the refugee camps of the country where they can move further. And I think that sometimes we have to escape from the Europe-centric vision and approaches, and to pick up some practices also from the more broad dimension.
That's a good advice. Alyssa, you have experience from a smaller community. Do you think that there's something that the bigger cities, they can learn from a smaller community now that we had examples of the community approach, that's really efficient? What could bigger cities learn from that?
Yes, like most people, when they think they're going to move abroad, they think big cities, right? They think that's where the opportunities are. But we have a shifting demographic issue in places like Sweden and Finland, where the countryside is emptying. And I have had to sort of reassess since moving to Åland 4.5 years ago, is there something we're missing here? Because proximity breeds, familiarity, curiosity. And when you're in these sort of smaller communities who I think are more acutely aware of the existential questions before them, their hospitals are closing, their youth are moving away, they might actually have a better sense of the stakes. And for what I have found is that moving to Åland has been a really great way for me to be visible, to be seen, and to be welcomed. That's not to say that Stockholm is a horrible place. It certainly isn't. It's a beautiful city. But coming to Åland has felt a lot more like home. And a lot more people have seen me and simply said, you know, you seem smart with this. Would you be interested in that? Hey, and then you get people contacting you saying, oh, I heard so-and-so, so-and-so, and so-and-so. It's a small community. So sometimes I wonder if maybe adapting more of a village mentality we have in major cities, for example, places where immigrants tend to congregate, where we tend to have more of those things. How can we build, like, for example, better infrastructure between these different areas so that they flow more freely? Can we build spaces in between, like multicultural gardens or other sorts of installations that open the opportunities for this kind of curiosity? Because I think human beings, even when I've met people who have never left Åland and have no desire to do so, just a few moments of interaction, they begin to ask questions. And then they begin to realize that, well, maybe we're not so different after all. And then they usually have a lot of great tips, and you know, on Åland, networking is everything. It's definitely the most important factor.
Okay. So let's move on to something a bit different. We have a Nordic capital network affiliated with our work on integration. And one of the issues that they would like to address is how to use digital tools to become more inclusive as a city. Is this something that you already also have some experience with that actually works? Or do you think this is a challenge that has to be addressed in the future as well? Yes.
I know we have a project in Copenhagen called the Ready School, which is sponsored by a lot of big companies, which is focusing on women who come as spouses to people, expats, who would get a job in Copenhagen. But some of the women or spouses, they are just somehow marginalized. They don't get the same attention, and they would be sitting home, not being able to use their degrees and background. So this project focuses on the spouses and other immigrant women, and take them in and give them IT skills. So and then trying to get them a job from the network that they have created, because they can highlight these people, these women, to these companies. Otherwise, they would be just invisible for being a group of people that you could recruit from. So Ready School is a really good project that's working right now.
And I do think that AI can be used to make people feel at home in AI.
Yes.
Is that useful, you think?
Yes, it's the case of displaced persons who flee crisis and conflicts. What can be done actually, or let's say start the story from the beginning, that when a place is completely demolished, when there is no archive that documents how a home was in the past, a sense of alienation happens among those who are displaced. And then there's like the personal identity and the community identity in the new environment becomes distorted. So this is a part where generative AI can work in, let's say, establishing an image of the home, not copying it, but taking the characteristics of the home from the stories of people and generating images with generative AI that can convey the essence of a place, which is home, without being a real place. This is something I worked on in my research, where I took stories from both host communities and displaced persons, and developed an approach on how to extract keywords that can convey a place essence, and then generated images. And then according with the interviewees, we worked on checking the accuracy and the representativeness of these images. And I could see so far it can be quite a helpful tool. In the future, this needs to be better systemized, and this is what I'm aiming to do in my research because it's part of it.
We have time to take questions from the audience. If someone would like to pose a question to our panelists, then I think, Helen, you have a microphone. You can have mine. But then meanwhile, we do have good examples. Oh, yes, sorry, yes.
I just wanted to comment
Yeah.
on the perspective of ICTs. We wrote an article with colleagues, with Nigerian colleagues here in Lithuania, on how ICTs influence look like in the process of migration overall, starting from the country of origin and then ending up already in the host country. And we did some more quantitative study over there, but still the results demonstrate that the impact of the ICT, starting from the social media and going just simply scrolling information about Lithuania, right, through the Google, for instance, is enormous. And I believe if it has such an impact on the migration process overall, so then why we cannot use technologies and, well, the new means in order also to facilitate the processes and to facilitate the integration to some extent as well. Because, I mean, this is something we will not escape from as well. Huh? We can see the AI revolution at least, well, right now, but overall ICT's development over time, I mean, it's a revolution, let's admit that. And I believe if we will not be able to find the mechanisms and the concrete steps how to incorporate also, you know, whether it's AI tools or it's more on the level of some certain software, for instance, right, for the language learning, well, then it will be very challenging for us to dream about the high standards of the integration processes.
What do you think, Alyssa? Would it have worked for you if there were tools, AI tools and digital tools in your own integration process?
Yeah, I have mixed feelings. First off, I can definitely say I'm very grateful that AI did not exist before I learned the language. So one of the things I'm a little worried about is that it could become a situation where people feel like, well, it has to be perfect now because AI tools exist, and you don't dare to try speak incorrectly or in a way that is perfectly idiomatic. That being said, I think that AI tools have a lot of great opportunities, and I do think that they reduce the emotional load. So often where I'm in a rush, I have 4 kids, I have things to do, I do not have time to figure out really heavy text, or I need a quick summary, and that is huge for me. But I worry that AI in some ways could be used as a way to create a barrier. When you're going through a tough time and you're immigrating, I don't want to see municipalities saying, well, you can talk to our chatbot. That's not a story of connection, that's a story of separation. So my concern, it could be that AI gets used in a way to offsource responsibility. Because I think that when you take people into your culture, you have a responsibility to them, and you should meet them as people, not as tech. But that being said, tech is very important.
Do we have any questions? Yes?
Thank you for all your reflections, Carlos, from the UN Refugee Agency, Stockholm. I think I have a question for all of you, and thanks a lot for your really interesting reflections. You know, and I will just refer to Dmytro's, approach on integration as a never-ending process, and I absolutely agree with it. And, in a context of inclusion integration as a never-ending process, we always talk about projects, short-term projects, 1 or 2 year, and as soon as we are facing the question of the good practice, we also hear the thing which is called the project. So, we are kind of addressing the long-term, never-ending process with the quite short-term tools and quite short thinking, even that thinking is based on the good practice, and I believe in the projects as a good practice. But for me, the question always is, what is the balance between the project as a short-term thinking on the one hand, and the system which should be in place on the other hand? Because the system, as a person, I strongly believe in the system, because the more people you have in your country, in your local community with the different cultural backgrounds, for me, all those projects, they should be part of either the cultural ethos or institutional framework, or both. So for me, the question, how do you see this critical, either the distinction or a combination of those two, which are both essential at the same time, but then it seems that always, or more often, the good practice under the project, it doesn't fly under the systematic approach. Thank you.
Yes.
So I was involved earlier in a research project with Lund University between Åland, and I did a lot of short-term interviews with people who work within social sustainability, but also environmental sustainability. And I think one big problem is that there is a culture of projects. There's a culture of 1.5 year, 2-year projects. There's no institutional flow. And then when you're talking about a political organization, then there's elections, which means that depending on how that goes, things get lost or down prioritized. That means that in reality, what we have is a bunch of patchwork initiatives, and they don't go together. So the reality for me is systematic. You have to think systematic. It has to be a standing person, standing institutional knowledge, and standing effort. And one of the other things I guess I would also say is that too often we focus on the culture that's arriving, but we don't focus on the culture of exclusion that preceded it. So one of the things I find a bit jarring is that too often, too much burden. It's like, here's a marketing thing for immigrants that are arriving here, which puts the burden on the newcomers to make the change in a culture they didn't create or break. So I think more and more we need to focus systematically and not just goodwill efforts here and there to say, well, we're doing something.
Mm-hmm. Let me just add something to that. We have a lot of private funds that are supporting a lot of projects, which is the way of innovating new thoughts, new ideas. And when it works, then it is taken over by the governmental institutions. We have had the motherhood project that I was telling you about. It started out as something that was private funded, but because it has such a huge impact, then the Copenhagen municipality, they have co-partnering it, and now it has been, it is being financed by the governmental, how do you say that, money that they give to these kind of projects. So there are both good sides and bad sides of project thinking, but I think it's necessary to have this project to think new thoughts. So, yeah.
And I think that you've all today managed to also raise some of these projects and try to see what can we learn from them. So this is the most important, that we can learn from the projects. Right? You wanted to comment as well?
Okay, yes. Just a quick comment, and maybe a broader perspective. Totally agree with your ideas that if we want to look beyond the short-term interventions for integration, we should think about the narrative itself, the migration narrative and the host communities narratives, because those narratives that would shape the public perception and the policy responses after that. Between stranger narrative that, for example, receives the migrants as external agents, producing change to the local or the host community context, and potentially being seen as threatening the systems, and between the host community narrative that it's how it interacts with the changes in its environment. So if we look into the narratives in general and worked on that, then this would be one step towards including it into the systems on the long term and achieving the sustainability of the projects.
So while we're having this conversation now on diversity and inclusion, we're also experiencing a political climate that is less conducive to inclusion. So, Rushy, you as a journalist, how do you think that media can help maybe redirect this development?
I think the biggest, challenge right now is to challenge the narrative of diversity inclusion being discriminative. Discriminative, how do you say that? Discriminative. Because the thing is that me as a journalist, it's my duty to expose the facts. Not saying that you are wrong, but just expose the facts that challenge that D&I is a negative approach to include people. It's also to not normalize the false narrative or the idea that these efforts are reverse discrimination. And then I think I need to draw in an example. A month ago, we had Special Olympic Games in Torino, and I interviewed the president of the Games, who was saying that I asked him the same question, that your people who are participating in these Special Olympics are people who are disabled by birth or not developed enough, and who are not functioning on regular basis in the normal society, if you can define normal as being able to do that. So how do you see these people in the light of being, all those D&I programs are being set away by the American government? And he said that one thing is the rhetoric, what you say as a politician, but when you see that the American delegation of special athletes come into the arena led by J.D. Vance's wife, then it's contradictory, because they say one thing and they do a different thing. They all know that you cannot take away the subsidies from people who has special needs. And there's not, he said, Timothy Shriver, that there's not one American politician who would go on air and say that I will take away the subsidies from a person with Down syndrome. They will not do it. But yes, there is a rhetoric, there is a narrative that should be challenged. And that is the duty of me as a journalist to go about and hold the power accountable to the effects of what they are doing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Any other reflection? Yes, Alyssa?
So many things. Yeah, the world climate is certainly not what we'd wish it to be. So often I have people meet me every day. I'm an American, so obviously I get comments. And I very often open my computer and I scroll for about 30 seconds and say, that's enough internet for today. And one of the things I always try to encourage people and get them to focus on is, yes, the news is bad. It is bad. But here we are. We can make this part of the world stronger. There are so many things that we cannot do, but there are many things that we can. So that would be the first. Second, I would also say is that recently I've had to take to task rather publicly one of our local newspapers, which has definitely engaged in a pattern of making people dependent upon outrage, introducing suspicion, reporting narrative more than facts, and recently sort of called them out in a very public way, and that led to a bit of a dust-up. The thing I also think about a lot, too, is the media has a responsibility, and it's not just clicks and engagement. And I think that that also has caused a lot of our problem in the world. It's definitely caused a lot of the problem in the United States. I think that we need to be very conscious of the news that we consume. I think we should be as conscious about it in the way that we put our clothes on in the morning. Because if we get mired down in all this hopelessness, and the worry about the way the world is, we'll freeze. We won't do the things that we could do. So.
Okay, thank you. But to finalize this debate, I would like to ask each of you, what do you think is the one thing that cities should do to become more inclusive to refugees and immigrants? Right? What do you think?
Yes. Maybe I will be boring by repeating the same thing again, that embracing the uncertainty in migrant and refugee practices. As mentioned previously, that integration doesn't start officially when they are assigned as refugees or when they start their asylum-seeking procedures. It starts from maybe from the roots. We look into the previous cultural practice, how they brought them into the local context, into how they are interacting with the built environment, with the social and cultural systems. So when we understand that this is something part of the integration, it's not something informal, then this would be one step towards building a city that is inclusive.
Thank you. Dmytro?
I would say we go and we talk with immigrant communities, and then we build up our actions based on that. So first we hear what do people tell to us, not, I mean, what, of course, we consider what we can do, how we can do, and so on. But if we, and now I come back to the holistic approach that I think each of us emphasized in the beginning, if we really wanted to make it happen, I think without communication with the immigrant communities in the different manners, it would be impossible.
Thank you. And Alyssa?
Always depart from the point that inclusion is not something a migrant achieves, it's something that a place offers, number one. And number two, inclusion is not a favor to the migrant, it's a shared investment. And should definitely depart from that attitude as well.
Thank you. And Rushy?
Well, I'll stick to the 4 words, DEIB. Diversity is getting invitation to the party. Inclusion is that you invite people to dance. Equity is that you feel relaxed enough to dance as you like. And belonging is that you dance like nobody is seeing you, just getting it all loose. So I think one thing, one word to sum it up is communication and dialogue. Being a media person, that is the key to create an inclusive city.
Thank you. So to summarize, it's to embrace uncertainty, talk with the immigrant communities, and to be aware that inclusion is offered by a place, and then also communication and dialogue. So it brings us back again to where we started. It really requires a holistic approach. So I want to thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us on this panel discussion.